Thank you, Liam. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the opportunity to share my experience with you folks today. I'm just delighted to be with each and every one of you. Liam, the prayer that you set us off with is enough really to reflect on and really allow it to go deep in our hearts. And when we do that, we give witness to and engage with and even encounter this God that we talk about in AA. It is a privilege and an honor to share my experience with you about prayer and meditation and about uh, what my experience has been. I've been sober now for coming up to 50 years of sobriety. I'm in Hamilton, Ontario at the moment. I'm 74 years old. I've been spent investing in AA all my adult life, one would say. I have three granddaughters, a boy and a girl, adult children. I belong to a group called Agape Group. Agape is a Greek word for unconditional love. The Greeks had it all over the English-speaking peoples because they had 5 words to define what love is. And agape is the highest form of love in the unconditional sense that the Father loves each of his children. And we adopted that name simply because to remind ourselves as group members that we are to love unconditionally and to give a warm welcome to any visitors who happen to visit us in our meeting. And my occupation, I'm a mental health coach. I started a community called Freedom Hour, which really embraces the ideas of emotional sobriety. I come to you writing my first book on God consciousness. I'm authoring this. I should have it out in the fall, which I'm very excited about sharing. And really, it's about the talk I'm giving today is very, very similar to what the ideas are in my book. And I don't think I'm going to say anything new to you today. I think that you probably heard it all before. But what I'd like to share with you is my unique experience and perhaps have you look at something in a different way. So the purpose really of my talk is for all of us to go deeper in our spiritual life. And that we'll notice that we never hit bottom or top of the spiritual life. It's always ever expanding and ever growing. And one can never claim that they have it all together because it is an unbelievable territory in the spiritual life. And there's a Greek phrase, kara terra, means distant lands without boundaries. And that's the kind of experience I get when I pray and meditate. It has no limits. The only limits that I impose is the limits I bring to the meditation and prayer for my expectations and my analysis and conclusions about what is happening in the meditative and prayerful experience. God certainly doesn't put any limits on it. And I'd like to share with you some ideas that have worked for me and maybe some ideas that haven't worked for me to advance this idea of being in the experience of God. So I also want to say to you, I'm not an authority on the subject. I have no theology training. What you're getting is someone who isn't made of genius, is somebody that's been in hell. And so anything I'm saying to you is my way. It's not the way. And that we each can experience God in our own particular way. Unique experiences that we have is very special and very sacred. And anything that we encounter with God, with our heart desiring to encounter, is unique to us. And that we learn to grow in the eyes and in the spirit of God, or the higher power of which we worship. So first off, I want to just say to you, very quickly, that I am an alcoholic. And for about 7 years of my life, I drank alcoholically. So it wasn't a very long time, but it was long enough time for me to recognize that's not what I wanted to do in my life. It's not how I wanted to conduct myself. And every time I seem to pick up a drink, I get into some sort of trouble. And even though I made promises about moderating and controlling my drinking, I was never very successful at it. Usually ended up in the same way, a fight or a car accident or some argument. So I learned quickly that there was some wrong with the way I mix alcohol and what my expectations around alcohol was. Although I didn't understand it or I didn't know it, I just knew that it wasn't working. And I went to AA. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous at the ripe old age of 23 years old, and two fellows came up and 12-stepped me, and they shared their experience with me. And they asked me if I could stay sober one day, and I said I could do that. And I went to the meeting the next night, and that was the beginning of the rest of my life. One thing I caught very quickly in Alcoholics Anonymous was hope. Up to this point, I was hopeless. I tried to quit drinking many times and control my drinking many times. I was always end up in the same way. It always ended up in failure. So because of that, I learned what they call learned helplessness. I had really no confidence that I could stay sober for any length of time. And I can remember even today, that young man was absolutely amazed that he could stay sober for 2 weeks. I mean, that was unbelievable. And people who are getting a year, I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. That's a miracle. I don't think I could ever do that. But friends, what happened was that as I got involved in being open in Alcoholics Anonymous, I just had to follow the instructions. I had to put aside my resistance and defiance and thinking that I knew how to run my life, and started following in the experiences of other people. And that was taught to me, I think by the grace of God, to recognize how simple, maybe not easy, but how simple that is to do. Then something happened in terms of my AA life. I was told to do the 12 steps. And this is what I want to share a little bit with you this today, and about the early part of my development in AA. One of the simplest and things to admit that I was powerless over alcohol, that was very clear to me. There was no guessing. There was no gray area that sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't. That the decision was very clear. Either I was going to put the plug in the jug or I was not. It's a yes or no situation. And because of that, it was very clear. Either I was going to do it or I'm not going to do it. And but what I want to talk to you about is that second half of that first step, because that's not so clear. That's not so black and white. That there's, I don't know, a lingering desire to control within me, to be self-sufficient, to have this idea that I can manage and handle my life. So what I learned was that I needed to recognize that my life was unmanageable. And this is what I want to start kind of organizing my thoughts with you, because they were important to me. You see, I thought my unmanageability was caused by my alcohol. And I assumed that once I stopped drinking, we used to have a phrase back then, I don't know if it's still used today, but once I stopped drinking, I'd be a saint by Thursday. Because I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous thinking alcohol was my problem. And if I removed the problem, my life would be fine. All friends will be friends again. My relationships would be good. My work ethic would come back. I would make right decisions, good decisions for myself, and that I could manage my life. And unfortunately, it wasn't like that. That somehow or another, which Dr. Silkworth points out, in the doctor's opinion, that I was restless, irritable, and discontent. Emotionally driven behaviors. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. And what I did was to reach out for comfort and ease in terms of alcohol. See, alcohol was a result of my restless, irritable, and discontent. It wasn't the cause of my restless, irritable, and discontent. So my sequencing was off. And I think that's important to mention because depending how much I'm going to admit my unmanageability of my life would be the same amount I would allow God into my life. And it took me a lot of years to understand this, because once I sobered up, I believed that I could handle my life and my life was manageable, and all I had to do was to learn more, do more, have more, and I would be just fine. So there was little room for God in that self-sufficient life. I was sober, and yet I was emotionally immature, and I was still very much self-centered. And so one of the things I learned was that I had to give up this idea. Because you look at this word, this phrase of restless, irritable, and discontent. What's common about it? Well, first thing that's common about it is that there's a selfishness to that. It's how I'm viewing the world and what I expect from the world and the people around me. I expected something. I was entitled to something. I wanted people to see the world the way I wanted to see it. I want them to more or less, I was the center of the universe and all the other people were just players. And because I couldn't get that, I was restless, irritable, and discontent. I was anxious, depressed. What I've come to learn is I was anxious and depressed because I was trying to control something which I could never control. You see, that's what control did for me, is this need to control people, places, and things, and yet there I was powerless. So all the effort I put into it, all the manipulation, the forcing, all that stuff ended up in the same place. I was being restless, irritable, and discontent. And I remained sober that way for a long time. And I thought I'd conquered something because I was no longer drinking, I was sober. And yet there was a certain quiet desperation in my life. This anxiousness, this I didn't fit in. And not that I was tempted to drink or not, but life was hard. Sobriety was hard. Relationships were hard. Self-confidence was nowhere to be found. And I didn't know what to do. And then, you know what's a great thing about our community? The great thing about our community is that as you continue in the conversation, the sacred conversation that we're having today, things open up. Things open up for me. I began to see that I couldn't control the things that I was trying to control. And I have to tell you, it extended to my thoughts and my emotions. So what not only was about people, places, and things, I began to see that I could not control my negative thinking or my uncomfortable emotions. In other words, I couldn't stop them from coming. And then I would try to use force to get rid of them. I would suppress them. I would pretend that they didn't exist. And I would say something, I want to be a positive thinker. Therefore, I'm going to ignore any negative thinking. And that is hard. That's a hard life to live. And then slowly and carefully, I guess, I move forward. And I come to believe in a power greater than myself to restore me to sanity. That was the only way out for me. I tried all my other little methods about knowledge and, being motivated to achieve things and learning more and doing more. And yet that more didn't fit the hole in my soul. So I turned to God. I turned to this idea of power. And I turned this idea that I couldn't control those things. And slowly, inch by inch, and I mean this, inch by inch. It doesn't have to be this way, by the way, but this is the way it was for me. So I started to open up to the possibility that I could not manage my life. Reality proved that to me. The universe was telling me that. The results I was getting in life were such that I knew that I couldn't manage my own life. So what did I do? Well, I did what I was instructed to do. I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to this power that came back into my life. And I want to share with you what a decision looks like. Sometimes we use words so often, they water down the essence of the word itself. Today, if I make a decision to go to a show this evening, for instance, the movies, I may change my mind. And that's completely acceptable. But this kind of decision wasn't about being on and off. It was about a commitment. The decision in this sense was I had to draw from that word, the CID family of words, to decide, really meant to kill off any other options. To kill off any other options like homicide, pesticide, suicide. And to decide means that I was being committed to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Not that it meant that I wasn't going to take it back, but my new default pattern was to always return it. I've heard for years, and I've said myself, I keep taking my will back. Well, that's not the end of the sequence. The end of the sequence is I give it back. So yes, in humanity, I take my will back and become willful. But as quickly as I notice it, I become aware of it, I hand it back. So what does it mean to take my will in my life? See, again, I'm looking at the alcohol in the first step was easy to witness and commit to because it's black and white. My life was like that, but my will was more vague. What does it mean, the will? And I started thinking about that because I am, I would say, a willful person, determined. And that's what got me into trouble, was my willfulness. But what is the will? And I come to this definition. Maybe this might help some of you, may not, but it would have helped me a great deal. The will is the first cause of everything. So I was giving up the position that I was the first cause of my life. And God's will, not to do his will, but his will was that he was the first cause of everything and everybody. Now that's important for me to share with you, and I'm going to explain why. So I hand my will and my life, this idea that I am self-determined, this self-sufficiency, this willfulness, I handed it over to God, to his care. Now I use in my prayer life, I use imagery as part of my prayer life. And what that means is this: it's important for me to visualize in my prayer me actually handing my will over, my will and life in a shape, like a box, and see myself walking towards this God, and to handing this box over to him and me letting go of it. See, that helps me and shows me what it really is like to hand my will over, my life over the care of God, because these are subjective states. They have no shape. But I can imagine it be happening. And as I continued to imagine it, I began to see the freedom that surrounds handing my will and my life over to God. And as I got used to that idea, I began to recognize the moments when I didn't have it, or when I took it back, rather, so that I can reach out and give it back to Him. See, this is all like a rehearsal. It's all a visual rehearsal of what it means to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Now, I often think about the word care now in the step 3. What does it mean to be placed in somebody's care? Now, let me ask you, have you ever been cared for? Have you ever cared for anyone? And what is that experience like? See, we can get to a place in reading these steps as an intellectual exercise. And the word care has an experience to it. And when I stop and reflected on this idea of care, I can experience the care. So these go beyond the words that are on pages into experience. So as I reflected on and allowed this imagery to take place, I used all my senses. My senses, a sense of taste and smell and sight and sound, touch. I used all my senses in this imagination, this imaginative prayer. And it became real to me. The experience was real to me, even though it didn't actually happen. So what did I get out of that? I got freedom. You see, when I turned my will and my life over to God's care, what was there to worry about? What's there to be anxious about? What is there to be frustrated about? What is there to be exclusive with? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is a foundational and a change of direction in my life that I never experienced before, because I thought, I used the words that if it was to be, it was up to me. And of course, this is completely opposite of the idea. I'm letting go of something that I truly value, and that's my will and my life. So now I'm going to get to a place of this. Now I'm reflecting on the will of God, not to do the will of God. I want to make that distinction. What I wanted you to look to is the will of God, causing, creating, causing everything. Do you know, and I'm sure you do, that the universes are still expanding? They're still being created. Universes that go on and on and on. And I can't even imagine what that's even like. See, God is causing that into creation. Now, God's will for me and for you is causing me and you, creating in us the kind of power that we could only dreamed of and which we search for in alcohol. Being placed in our identity so that we can fulfill our life's purpose and meaning. Or in other words, to do God's will. But it starts with this idea of belief. Believing that God is causing rather than John is causing. A change in me. Because I try to change all the time. And I have to tell you, I made some good changes in my life on my own. I can name a couple, like smoking cessation, about being on time, working harder, more diligent, getting me more prepared. I made those improvements. But the essence, the change that I'm talking about here, I have no ability to change. And that is the change to be a servant leader, to let go of my selfishness. didn't have that ability. But I could believe that God is causing me to make that change. See, Alcoholics Anonymous is knitted in a perfect mosaic. We recognize that we can't experience God consciousness and have a past, an unfinished past. We need to be responsible for our actions and our behaviors, both drunk and sober, and come to some conclusion and begin to see and increase my awareness where those patterns show up. So we do that through an inventory, an estimate, I call it today. I know it's a fact finding. It's suggested that, you take your time and it's a fact finding exercise. Well, I've learned a great deal about myself and about the labels I put on myself, and there's always something else. Let me just give you this example. If I hold up this piece of paper here, you see, I hold up this piece of paper. It's a blank piece of paper, and I ask everybody here, can you see the cloud in the paper? And you would say, John, you're a goofy old guy. There's no cloud in the paper. The paper's blank. So, and if I say to you this, well, if there wasn't a cloud, there would be no rain. And if there was no rain, a tree couldn't grow. And if a tree couldn't grow, it couldn't be cut down and made into paper. So the cloud is in the paper, but we just can't see it. And it's the same with my inventory. I don't permanently or think that I have concluded the labels exactly the way they are. I am always open to see something differently than what I already thought I had. You see, I can't see the cloud in my paper. And I don't want to be too sure. See, one of the human conditions is certainty. I want to be sure of things because it makes me comfortable. So I want to drive something to the conclusion of. But that's where I can no longer learn anything. If I've judged something or concluded something about myself or about anybody or anything, there's nothing more to learn. So I want to give witness to my inventory and I want to be responsible for it, but I always want to be open-minded. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying to you. I had a conversation with a man a few years ago now, and he was sharing back and forth, and he said to me, John, he said, I'm a procrastinator. I said, well, that's fascinating. And he said it with a tone of pride. You know what I mean? He was delighted to tell me that he was a procrastinator. And I asked him this. I said, have you ever done anything on time? He says, of course I have. I said, well, tell me some of the things you did on time. And he would tell me about projects at work. He'd be home and dinner on time. If he made an appointment with his buddies, he'd be there on time. And so he gave me a litany of things that he did on time. So I asked him, how could you possibly be a procrastinator? You're not a procrastinator. Now, you have procrastinated, but you're not one. You are something else. And I'd like to share with you for a few moments before I get into meditation, the differences between the identity and behaviors. So if I was a procrastinator, that means it would be in my nature to procrastinate. And I can't control my behavior or my identity, my nature. It's impossible. So am I a procrastinator? Well, no, I'm not. I have a habit of procrastinating. My behaviors are such, but I am not that. You see, I am someone who's being caused by God. I have been given purpose and meaning in my life to fulfill. That's my identity. My identity has been infiltrated by my poor language by saying, I'm this, I'm that, I'm not good at that, I'm this, I'm that. And none of that is true. And what I've learned about this exercise of inventories between steps 4 and step 10 is that I have to protect my identity. I've got to be responsible for my behaviors, but I have to protect my identity. Why? Because it's sacred. And if I think my identity is broken, weak, and bad, my identity promotes certain behaviors. So instead of me trying to correct my behaviors, I turned back to my identity and cleaned out that space and allowed God to enter my identity, to cause me to become the man that I am supposed to be. So the difference for me today when I talk about steps 4 and step 10 is not I am, it is I have or I do. It's all about my actions and my behaviors. So as I cleaned out this identity, what's coming close to me is this idea that God is with me. He's in me. How do I know that? How can I share this with you? How can I be sure of this? Well, somebody made a comment about me both being silent before the meeting started, and I thought it was a wonderful comment, because in my view, God's first language is silence. And I want you to imagine something, if you would, if you're a meditator, if you're not a meditator. But just imagine your God, whoever you choose to call God, is sitting beside you on a park bench on a beautiful sunny day. And you're sitting there, and you're about 2 feet away from this great power, this creator who's causing the universe, who's causing me, is sitting right beside me and sitting right beside you. Use your imagination of what that God would look like, what his tone of voice would be, how interested in this God would be beside you, and what would be happening in this conversation, as if that conversation is actually taking place, because it is. How could you walk away from that meeting not being changed? It's impossible. And that's what it is with meditation. It's an experience. It's an encounter. It's sitting in silence, being who I'm being. And with this, however you describe God to be, whatever name you give God, let's just call for this conversation here love. You're sitting and surrounded and basking in love, allowing love to pour over you and through you, in front of you and on top of you, being all over you. And as you experience that feeling, you experience that encounter, you are being changed. I'm certain of it, because I walk away from those encounters changed. Now, I don't always see the change, but I believe the change has taken place, because I don't believe anybody in this universe who, meeting their creator, would not have been changed. So how does one go about getting into this state of being? Well, first thing we want to pay attention to is our thoughts aren't helpful. Matter of fact, our brains are working contrary to the spiritual world. What is the brain wanting to do? It wants to judge. It wants to compare. It wants to evaluate and analyze. It wants to conclude. So all of those things are very good things, by the way, and we have to have a brain to use to function in the world. So I'm not suggesting that it's something wrong with it. But what I am suggesting, it doesn't help in meditation. So it's not that we're going to stop thinking in meditation, but what we're going to be doing is not paying attention to it. We're going to be focusing on something else. And the brain's going to do what the brain's going to do, because remember earlier I said you can't control what the brain's doing. You're not, it's not like you're inviting thoughts in and only having those thoughts come into your brain. Thoughts come in from all over the place. Positive, negative, neutral, ridiculous thoughts. You know, 1 minute you're here in this meeting, the next minute you're in Florida. You know what I mean? It's wild. So we can't control it in a sense that we can do anything about these thoughts coming in. But what we can do is focus our attention on something else. So what we do in meditation is we focus. Now, there's lots of ways of meditating, and all of them, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but what I'm saying, the one I use is silence. I also use visualization, but mostly I use silence. And I use a word called Maranatha. Maranatha is an Aramaic prayer phrase meaning, come Lord. And I break it up into syllables. And I sit upright, and I pay attention to my breath, and I breathe deeply. And as I get in touch with my breath, guess what happens? I move into the present moment. You see, isn't that interesting? Everybody wants to live in the now. Everybody talks about getting out of the past and getting out of the future, and where life is in the moment. But nobody tells you how to do it. To bring you back in the present moment just quickly is pay attention to your breath. Now, to get out of our heads, what happens is I am always in my head. What I need to do is get into my body, the heart space. I need to reconnect to the body sensations. And that's why the breath takes me. It takes me to reconnect my whole experience. And as I pay attention to my breath, I allow my muscles just to relax. And my feet are on the floor. It's another way of getting into the present moment, is feeling parts of your body where it is. Brings you, bang, right in the present of the moment. And when you find your mind drifting to some other place in the past or in the future, all you have to do is feel your feet on the floor or your rear end on the back of the chair or whatever it is, or your breath. You get catapulted back in the present moment. Now, if you think about this, there's only one place where we can meet God. There's only one place that's existing. Past isn't existing. It's gone. Future hasn't happened yet. So those two places you can't meet God. You can't have a divine experience when you're thinking about the past or when you're thinking about the future. The only place you can have a divine experience is in the moment, is now. See, this is the beauty about meditation. It brings us present. And as we start to relax, our feet are on the floor, we may close our eyes, and one might think, well, this is nice, it gives me peace, I have rest. All of those things are true, by the way. Your heart rate may go down, your blood pressure may go down, and you feel rested. All of those things are true. But that's not how we meditate. That's not why we're meditating. We're meditating to be in the presence of God and to experience the kind of life-giving changes that God has prepared for me and for you. And for us to consent to that experience. Yes. Yes. You see, part of me giving up this self-sufficiency was to realize I don't have to discipline myself to meditate. You hear the self-centeredness in that? You hear the need for control in that? All I need to do is to say yes to the invitation. And I love the invitation of come and see. God is asking me, John, come and see. Come and be with me. Come by that park bench and sit with me. And I say yes. Today I say yes. I say yes every day to this beautiful, loving experience. of being cared for by my Creator. Now, I can tell you in meditation, it's difficult to explain. You have to experience it. Words are not sufficient to really tell you exactly what this experience is like. The only thing one can do is actually experience the experience. And as I sit there, some things are obviously changing me, some things I have no idea. And I no longer judge. I no longer say I had a good meditation or a bad meditation, or I felt like I changed or I haven't changed. No, all of that's gone out the window. I'm just satisfied and grateful to be in the experience of God. See, what my mind is doing, by the way, is acting up. It's like, hey, I want some attention here. Don't do that. I call this the false self, the ego self, the self that I created. I like to think of it, and this is a reduction of reality, by the way. This isn't really true, but this is how I can sort it out. That I created this person called ego through my conditioning and learned experiences. God didn't create that individual. And God may not even be able to see that false self because he didn't create it. He created a true self, the one that he's causing. So what I need to do in meditation is to listen to my true self and be open to whatever God is directing me. And hopefully I'm able to get it right. Not all the time. But it's my desire to fulfill what God is urging me to do. See, there's lots of things in the mind that have gone wrong. The thinking, the cognitive dissonance is called. There's distortions, the way in which I think. The coloring of the emotions. And for all those years, I remember that I trusted what my thoughts were as if they were truths, rather questioning them whether they're real or not. But the body doesn't lie. See, the body doesn't lie. If I have these sensations in my body that I recognize, I can trust those. If I'm feeling like guilt, for instance, I can trust that feeling. Because underneath that feeling of guilt is a need that's not being met. A virtue, perhaps, that's being ignored. See, I had to learn a lot about myself and how I was dealing with things like feelings. I don't know if any of you resonates with you, but somehow or another, I miss the handbook being handed out at birth, where it told me about how to handle emotions and how to handle my thinking. Somehow or another, I just didn't know how to do it. So what I would do is try to force my way through emotions, ignore them. And I think about it, why did I drink? I drank because I didn't know how to deal with restlessness, irritable, and discontent, which could be called emotions. And therefore I sought relief instead of dealing with them. I had to learn to deal with them because they were real. Fear is an example that infiltrates everything in my life. Oftentimes I've prayed about, please get rid of the fear from me. I prayed about it. You know what remained? Fear. And if you think about it, fear is a natural response to our environment. We've been conditioned over hundreds of thousands of years. And fear is what nature has given us for us to be safe. Back then, when the caveman went out of his cave, he was carrying the spear, going for the hunt, and he come across an animal that could eat him. Fear would kick the adrenaline in, so that person could fight or flee. So that person could fight harder and for his life, or he could run faster away to protect himself. So fear is a natural response. So for me, not to fear is an ideal. It's not possible. It's in my DNA. So I had to learn to deal with the fear. I had to learn to be with it, to process it, to observe it, not to be driven by it, or not to be stopped in my life because of it, but to be with it. And as long as I've been doing that, I'm able to keep moving ahead. And I can say anything about the emotions, anything. They are nothing but a compass for me today, a compass that's given me feedback on my life. So I no longer ignore them. I no longer suppress it. I no longer try to force them out of my life or pretend they don't exist. I've come to acknowledge them for what they are and what they can do for me. And it gives me an opportunity to grow, to see where I've gone wayward so I can correct the behavior. See, Alcoholics Anonymous has done a great deal for me. It's got me out of isolation. In the fifth step, it brought me to this idea that I'm not unique and not bad. And that the things that I thought and did were just things that that just existed. That everybody in the shared humanity did the same kinds of things that I did. I was no longer felt isolated. I felt finally back to God in the community. I felt a part of. The feeling of belonging is so very vital and important to us as a human species. And all this education I was getting in AA, all the work that I've been doing and the God's presence in my life, and it would come to step 6 and 7, somehow I got that messed up. I didn't follow the very simple instructions. I went back to self-sufficiency until I could no longer be self-sufficient. And again, I went deeper in the surrender. See, Alcoholics Anonymous, there are no limits. There are no boundaries in a sense. Surrender is very much like that. Be able to learn to let go. And for what reason? To give me freedom. Freedom. Isn't that what I was after? Isn't that what you're after when you picked up a drink? Is to have some sort of freedom, peace, joy, to be okay, to be your own best friend. Isn't that why? It's a human condition to be free. Friends, I would talk to you a little bit about step 10 if I could, and that is this. I was focused on weaknesses, and I had those weaknesses define me as a human being. And I spend no time in my strengths. Today, I don't do that. Today, I spend equal time on my strength development, strength awareness, as well as identifying the weaknesses in which I have and the coping skills I need to learn to overcome the weaknesses that I have, but to fully participate in the strengths that have been given to me. See, moving back to identity again. Am I this person I say that I am, that I'm being inspired and caused by God, or am I not? And I don't think the person or the deity that's causing me wants me to tell me myself continually how bad I'm at something. See, it reduces the effectiveness. We can't drift into worry and thinking that we're not good at things. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. And I had to relearn how to do step 10 because I had to invest in the strength development. What I'm good at. It isn't bragging, by the way. I used to think it was bragging that if I said I was good at something, my ego was out of line. I don't know where I learned that, but that's what I've concluded. Not anymore. I've been given those gifts, and whatever those gifts are, I need to develop those gifts. That's my job. And as I continue to focus on my strengths, my well-being increases. The zest for life increases. The joy of living increases. I can remember for a lot of years, I used to get out of the bed and say, oh, good God, it's morning. Today I got out of the bed. This morning I said, good God, it's morning. What changed? What happened? You see, I think what's happened in the process of the 12 steps is the channel has been cleared through this divine identity. It's been cleared. So I can see from my identity, my behaviors, and from my behaviors back to my identity. I believe that I'm doing what God wanted me to be, to do the things that I think He wants me to do. How do I know that? Because I have a zest for it. I have a mission for it. I'm excited about it. I don't feel broken or torn down or obligated or what the word is today, the phrase is today, burned out because of it. I feel enlivened. To be with you here in this moment, there's no place I would rather be but to be with you. No place. That's not who I was or who I thought I was. That's who I became. That's because God caused me to make these changes. You know, you often wonder what a spiritual awakening looks like, you see. I don't know. To me, it's like what Chuck Chamberlain talked about, a new pair of glasses. It was very much like that. Or to use another metaphor, it was like the Wizard of Oz, where it went from black and white to color in that movie. That's what a spiritual awakening is like for me. That I'm mindful. I'm very much aware, and I'm connected to my experiences of the day. That I wake up and I'm engaged in what I'm doing. You can always tell when you're engaged in something. It's a condition of well-being, by the way, being engaged. You lose track of time. So I'll give you an example. It just happened to be recently. As I'm writing my book here, I'm so engaged in doing it. I had some boiled eggs on the stove that ran dry. And I heard popping in the kitchen. Pop, pop, pop. And I thought, what the heck is that? You see, 45 minutes went by in the blink of an eye because I was doing something I thought was fulfilling my mission. I lost all track of time. And I felt so good about that experience as I went to the kitchen and cleaned out all the hard egg on the walls. But that's the experience of being engaged. You see, the other thing that's so vitally important to me is relationships, how I relate to things. How do I relate to other people? How do I relate to myself? I don't know about you guys, but you know, alcoholics tend to be very self-critical and judgmental, harsh. They would say things to themselves that they would never say to another human being. Then behind that is this perfectionism that exists, even though we say we're not perfect. but our experience is such that that's how we measure ourselves. See, I had to learn to be self-compassion. I had to learn to understand rather than to judge myself. One of the best gifts I think I've gotten in this program is something called self-acceptance. That I no longer have to be somebody else doing something else where I'm at some other place. That was where I've been for a lot of years. I've accepted myself for who I am and who I'm not. And I'm okay about that. See, self-acceptance isn't about becoming anything. It's just about being. And being is where life is. That's what the spark is being okay with who you are. Foibles and all. To accept yourself for who you are. Not to self-rate yourself for who you're not. You hear how critical that is and how that sounds? So step 10 often comes down to self-rating, your self-evaluation. Am I worthwhile or am I not worthwhile? You see, it's inconsistent with the gifts that we've been given to us to rate ourselves in that manner. There's two kinds of mindsets, a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset judges. You're either worthwhile or you're worthless. And I have a way of rating that, which is normally not, which is way too high, because there's a perfection in behind here, the context of perfection. And that's what makes life hard. We impose this on ourselves. Instead of saying in step 10, this is who I am, and I'm glad to be that person. I've accepted myself. God has given me exactly what he's given me, and I have a desire to fulfill it. And not that I fulfill it every day perfectly. Of course not. But it is my desire to fulfill it is what counts. Friends, I don't know of anything that's more meaningful in my life, and hopefully your life, is to be able to have the confidence to reach out to another human being who is suffering. In the rooms or out of the rooms, a human being who is suffering, that I'm willing to reach out and say, come and see. Come and see. You don't like your life the way it is? Come and see. Have a look. You just might find something here. You see, what a beautiful thing to be able to do, to be that servant leader, to care enough for another human being so that they can pick up their mat and walk. You see, there's nothing greater than that, friends. There's absolutely nothing greater than that. What I get to do is practice this stuff every day. I get to practice this character development. I get to practice God consciousness. I get to pay attention to my strengths. I get to care. All of this has been given to me as a gift. A gift. I don't deserve it. I'm not entitled to it. I didn't earn it. I just followed some instructions. And I was willing to let go of my resistance and defiance and to learn how to live a better life. I stopped the debate, the arguing, the ambivalence. Yes, but. You know, there's an old saying that even a corpse follows the flow of the river. And all I had to be was that corpse. I just had to follow you. I just had to follow your direction and your suggestions. I just had to stick my nose in places that I wouldn't have stuck my nose in if it wasn't for your influence. And that was simply taking up the work that we do here. And I've gotten so much more than the absence of alcohol. I got meaning. I got purpose. You know, I've said to you, I'm 74 years old, and there's not much runway ahead of me, right? You know, they're running short of runway here. I could. Somebody asked me a question a couple of days ago. If I had known that only one more year to live, what would I be doing? My response to that person, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing today. That's the truth. I wouldn't change anything to what I did yesterday. I had conversations with people. I had wonderful conversations, spiritual, divine conversations, sacred conversations with people, what they're up to and what they're doing in their lives, and it's been so enlivening. I get to be with you. How beautiful is that? I get to talk about my faith in God and about the experiences that He's given me. I couldn't ask for anything more. I have a 5-step process on praying, by the way, and I'll just share it with you because I think it's important to share. I kind of went to meditation rather than prayer, and I just want to double back a little bit on prayer. One of the things that I use every day is kenosis, the Greek word again. It means emptying out. We would say in a language like letting go. We would look at kenosis as emptying out of everything I think I know. And it's best described as a set-aside prayer. Actually, it is about allowing yourself to let go of judgments and preoccupation about what you think you know. And you come to a space as a child would, like a dry sponge waiting for water. Kenosis is about emptying everything that's in your mind to make room for and be available for God. You see, we can't experience God when we're so full in our heads about what's going on in our life, the argument we just had, or the money worries that we could have, or what kind of day it is, or I have to miss work, or what about the family, taking to school, all these things that fill up our lives, and rightfully so. You're not going to get rid of them. But what we can do is temporarily set them aside and become available so we can lean in on the experience. And when we lean in on the experience, we're not really thinking about and evaluating about what's going on. We're absorbing, we're letting in, we're experiencing something. So kenosis is a great place to start. Step 2 is really about identifying the holy ground on which I'm on. See, I need to have a mindset that what I'm about to do is sacred. If I just start praying some words, then it's like speaking into a can. It seems just to echo. I have to take my sandals off and stand on holy ground. The sacredness of this moment needs to be prevailing in my attitude. I need to pray whatever's on my heart, which may mean a predetermined prayer or it may not. And to savor those words. Savor them in a sense that I'm just not speaking to something out there that's so distant and so far. I'm speaking to something that's in here, that's listening. And that I believe that there's an answer there, even though I may not know what the answer is, but I believe there's been an exchange. Not that it's transactional, by the way, but when I'm praying a prayer, I got to believe that I'm being answered, not ignored. Because there's a relationship between I have with my God, and that is one of love. It's a relationship. And if I could not ask this God for the things that I want to ask, if I didn't have a relationship with him. So I want to experience that, not think about it. I want to use the full body in this expression of what's happening. I alluded a little bit earlier about the use of constructive imagination, the inner sense of a constructive imagination. You know, uh, some of us are long in the tooth here, but you remember when you were children using your imagination? And it didn't matter where you were or who you were with. Somehow or another, your imagination would take over. And you were in awe of someone next to you who was now your new best friend who you only met 5 minutes ago. And that you're so much into the experience of whatever you're doing, you weren't thinking about what's going on. That's what it means in the prayerful world, where you're just so engaged in the experience. You're not thinking about anything. You're engaged in the experience. So the words in which we pray, I actually believe they're actually occurring. Not necessarily to my advantage, by the way, because sometimes the answer is no or not now. But I've been heard because that love relationship would demand that. So I pray my prayer, and then at the end of the prayer, I say amen. Amen in the Greek word, not the Hebrew word, but in the Greek word, means so be it. So be it. Which is an element of faith that goes into the end of the prayer. So be it. And I offer a prayer of gratitude and thanksgiving for what we actually experienced. Then I sit for a few moments after that in quiet, kind of reviewing and reflecting what actually took place. Because that's what it's like to pray. You see, there's a difference of saying a prayer and experiencing a prayer. God wants me to experience the prayer. I'm sure of it. I think he's delighted that I show up no matter how I show up. But I think prayer itself, the experiencing of the prayer, is where this all leads to. What do I know? I don't know a heck of a lot, friends. What I do know is that God loves me. I know that. I know that God has given cause to my life. I don't understand why, but He's causing me all the time. At my age, I'm not winding down, I'm winding up. I'm so empowered by what I'm doing. I can't explain the enthusiasm that exists in my heart. I believe my heart desires to do what's right and good, and I'm able to examine that better now than what I've ever could be before. I don't have any emotional driven behaviors anymore like I once did. That I sit and pause and I ask the great question, what would the master do? And that gives me almost all the time a better alternative than what I would have reacted to. So these are things that are so very important to me. I'm traveling the world. I'm in Hamilton, Ontario at the moment, but I'm on my way to Belize in a couple of months. And I've been in Texas for 6 months to see Norrin on here. She kindly take me out to dinner a couple of times when I was in San Antonio. I've been in the east coast of Hamilton east coast of Canada for 6 months, and now I'm heading to Belize pretty soon. What kind of life is that to lead? It's 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 perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Yeah, if I would know that I was going to die next year, I'd do exactly what I'm doing right now. being with you, sharing this love conversation with you and the message of hope. We are fortunate people. We're people who have been blessed, who have been given a miracle, not only for a new life, but also to share that new life with other people so that they can have a new life. Just unbelievable purpose. If any of you would like to hurry your recovery or deepen your spiritual life, there's a piece in step 12 I'd just like you to point to, and that's practice the principles in all our affairs. The deliberate and intentional practice, the intention to practice these ideas every day, not when they come around when we think about them. There's a Latin phrase called is unum necessarium, the one necessary thing. For a lot of years, where my prayer life was just one of many tasks I decided to do that day, it fit in with taking the kids to school or going to work and going grocery shopping. So my prayer and meditation life was one of those tasks. But I come to appreciate that prayer and meditation isn't one of those tasks. It's unum necessarium. It is the one task. It is the one task I must do every day. It is the life-giving, the oxygen. It is the bread and the spiritual bread in which I need to eat to make a difference in my life. Because without that experience, I lose sight of the fact that God is causing me. Friends, I think I'm just about out of time. I got 8 minutes left, but I'm not going to drag it on because I think I'm out of conversation. I want to thank you, and I bless each of you. And that whatever God is saying to you, it is my desire and wish to say to you, just go and do it. Do it. Don't question it. Just do it. Because you know that God is causing you to do it. You don't have to do it on your own anymore. We have the creator of the universe urging us, nudging us, giving us the kind of courage and wisdom needed to fulfill what's on our hearts. Don't become something. Be something. Thank you very much for your invitation and your kind listening. Bye-bye.